Yes, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for the first episode of our UNC Basketball Lookahead Series. And I feel like it was only right to start with the guy we're going to be talking about in this one. And obviously, you know who that is since you've clicked on the video. And that's Armando Bacot, fifth-year senior. Graduate. I guess he's a guy in graduate school as well right now. So, he's a guy that seems and feels like he's been around the program for a long time, been around since my first year of covering North Carolina. I know. I was going to say, when I kind of first started, Armando was kind of that first full year that I covered the team was the COVID year, the Cole Anthony year. And, so Armando's a guy that has been around for a while, and it's been pretty cool to see his growth. Yeah. I started.
You started in 18. So
yeah, and I covered some of the basketball season, but I feel like my first year of really being into it from the very, very beginning and kind of understanding.
I know you were at that epic ACC tournament game against Duke in Charlotte.
Yes, I was in that one. That was a fantastic game, and then got to really cover the team the next year. That's when I felt like I was really, really in it and kind of covered them from start to finish. And then won a great year for the Tar Heels, but a fascinating one to cover for various different reasons. But we're going to talk about Armando Bacot in this podcast. This podcast is sponsored by MyPatriotFranchise.net as well. We'll talk about them a little bit later on, so stay tuned for that. But AJ, I mean, we've talked about Armando so much over the last 4 or 5 years in his game and how it's developed and just kind of how important of a player he's been for North Carolina. Obviously, did some good things last year. Maybe not the season he wanted, or obviously not the season that Carolina as a team wanted, but it goes without saying that Armando is integral to what Carolina is going to do going into this year and has been integral to what Carolina's tried to do over the last few years as well, including the run to the national championship game. So let's start with his game, AJ, and the offseason work he's been putting in. What do you think Armando's kind of been working on this offseason? What have been some of the things that he's been focusing on and trying to, refine in his game as he goes into his final season in Chapel Hill?
Quicker, more decisive with the ball down low. I think that the improvements we saw last season, the first 2 months of last season, and we saw a lot of improvements from the year before, but we didn't see it as much once everybody started double and triple teaming him in the middle of January. I think we'll see an advanced version of that. I think we're going to see a guy who adds that 10-footer. He developed a really good move from, I want to call it the left baseline, but the left side, where he would get a dump down or he'd step out, and he was able to make a move on his man. The first dribble being a face the defender dribble, and then get his huge midsection on a player and just abuse him by owning him, getting him on his hip, and being able to turn and score either way. A couple of dribbles and he's at the rim. I think we're going to see him catch and shoot that jumper some. I think we'll see him find guys cutting. This is going to be much more of a cutting team this year than last year was, because they have a lot of guys with vision. They have a lot of guys that are comfortable playing in space and creating space through movement, space for others through movement. So I think we'll see that part of his game a little bit more. And I know that he's worked a lot, certainly in the last few weeks, because the players were away. He spent a lot of time doing stuff that he needs to show the NBA he can do. A lot of videos out there about Armando shooting three-pointers and hitting three-pointers and that kind of thing. I don't think you're going to see Armando launching threes every game. I go back to the big man from Connecticut last year. I think he hit two threes in the Final Four, 2 threes in the national championship game. And it was, he's not a perimeter shooter, but those shots were there, and they were there off the high ball screen a couple of times, and he hit them. And what that did was that just forced defenses to prepare for it. So if Armando can hit one every once in a while off of a high ball screen, just totally handcuffing defenses, freezing a defense when they know that that's going to be there, and they can't sag off knowing that the only way he's going to get the ball is by rolling to the basket after setting that screen. I think it's going to open up even more stuff for the team. So, but a lot of that, Jacob, I think he was doing because that's what he's going to have to show he can do in the combine.
Yeah.
When he goes to the combine next year and he works out for NBA teams, he's going to have to show he could catch square and shoot, catch square and shoot, catch square and shoot. He has to show those things. And that's what he was working on. You don't want him to only do the stuff he's going to do 38 minutes a game for the Tar Heels because he's got to think about his own personal future. So when the season ends, say that they get to an Elite Eight or a Final Four and the season ends at the end of March or early April, he's only got a few weeks before he's going to be working out for a bunch of people and doing combine stuff. That's not enough time to get in there and just grind your game, turn your game into a lab experiment in a sense, just grind on some of the elements that he's not going to be asked to show a whole lot with Carolina, but will to the next level. So now he's been through those routines. He can work on it some on his own. So then when the season ends, he's already gotten a lot of that work done. So then he just works on refining for a couple of weeks and then goes and plays in front of the people that he hopes will pay him a lot of money. So I like the way he's handled it. I like the way he's handled his offseason in general. He wasn't doing TV shows and throwing out the first pitch at Orioles games or anything like that. I think it was a more laid back offseason. I think a little bit more of a grinding offseason as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think one of the we talked about this before. I feel like there was kind of a myth going around early in the season last year that Armando's game, especially on the block, didn't improve. And I remember sitting beside you at a couple games in the Smith Center, just looking at each other and being like, man, that's so much quicker. Man, that's so much more decisive. Yep. His move down there, it's so much more fluid. It looked like in the past, it was something he was 80% comfortable making maybe a move on the block to get a shot up. It looked like last year he was 98% comfortable making a lot of those, especially early in the season. I know for different reasons, maybe his game dropped off towards the end of the year, just like the entire teams did. But there was kind of a myth that I think needs to be, I think people understand it now, but I do remember us having conversations last year of his game has improved. His moves in the post are so much better. And I think you can expect even more of a jump going into this year because of the extra reps and because of what he's been working on this season. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well, because I just remember having a lot of conversations about that.
It's still a narrative. It's the narrative. When we run these Armando pieces and they hit all different forms of social media, so many of the comments are going to be, well, he needs to improve this time. He didn't improve last year. Yeah, he's going to say stuff like that. When he did improve, he improved a lot. But what happened is in January, when teams figured out, okay, this Nets thing isn't really working out the way they hoped it would, Caleb isn't going to get hot. He's going to keep firing stuff up. Leaky's a nice player, but Leaky's leaky. And RJ's on the ball so often that it's hard they can't create shots for him when he's on the ball so much. So they became really easy to defend. On top of that, other teams knew what plays they were running. And I've said this many times before, but I've had several Tar Heels several players told me multiple times, teams knew their set, so they were able to snuff it out. So they became easier to guard. They started doubling down on Armando because if RJ couldn't get the ball to Armando, then man, the offense would bog down. Unless just Caleb happened to be hot for a while, Leaky hit some shots. That was kind of it, right? Mm-hmm. So that's when Armando's numbers dropped. He didn't hit 20 points after the home NC State game, January 21st. He didn't score 20 points again. So it wasn't so much him. It was a product of everything. And if you look at their overall offensive efficiency numbers as a team, they dropped off significantly from that moment on. So beforehand, go look at some of the film. Go look at the Ohio State game. And go look at the Michigan game against Hunter Dickinson. Tell me he wasn't an improved player. He was an improved player. So if you see that guy all year now, because teams can't double him, they can't triple him. If Hubert doesn't run so many sets that teams can snuff out because they know what's coming, and they do run a more free-flowing thing, Armando is going to be the beneficiary. Mm-hmm. And he has a chance to post the kind of numbers people expected a year ago. He still had damn good numbers, but it wasn't ACC Player of the Year stuff. If they're free flowing and they make a concerted effort to get him the ball, the Roy Williams, get the ball inside. It's a much higher percentage shot from 2 feet than it is from 20 and run their offense that way, then Armando has a chance of being ACC Player of the Year and getting his banner in the jersey. I think he's got a really good shot at getting his banner in the jersey. And he wants to win, and we'll get into the winning thing here in a minute.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you go watch that Michigan game, if you just want to see a clinic on how to play against a guy like Hunter Dickinson, who's a very good college basketball player, let's not get it twisted. That might be his most impressive performance, because he absolutely schooled him for 40 minutes, and it was almost mind-boggling to watch at times and how easy it made it look. So go watch that film. If you don't think he developed.
It's a great point you make about Hunter Dickinson, because go back and look at the Zach Edey game from the year before. All those bigs that Purdue had. Armando struggled against size, but he didn't struggle as much against size last year because he got so good at getting guys in his hips, because that's the decisiveness in those moves. He got guys on his hips in the right spot. Get a guy on your hip from 8 feet away, there's not a whole lot you can do. Then his length really becomes an issue. But if you get a guy on your hip at 4 feet, and you're able to work some moves, it becomes more advantageous for you. And that's what he did. And Zed Key and all the bigs from Ohio State, he did that to them too.
Yeah.
So Armando was a better player last year, but circumstances just dragged everybody down. I think we're going to see a far more well-rounded guy. We may see a couple of those threes, but I don't think that that's necessary for this team to be successful, or for Armando to post the kind of numbers I think he can post. I think all that stuff is going to help him more in the middle of April moving on next year.
100%. Real quickly, AJ, I want to give a shout out and a thank you to our sponsor on this podcast. That's myperfectfranchise.net. For those who have followed us for years now, you guys know who Andy is. You know how much we love what he does at myperfectfranchise.net. And even some people watching this have had really good success with him and by reaching out to him and getting involved with what he does. So if you're looking to open a franchise, maybe looking to diversify, your portfolio, start a new career, just have a little bit of a side hustle that you can rely on and work on, My Perfect Franchise can do it. Andy can help you open your own franchise, become your own boss, and he will do it 100% free. If you don't make a dime, AJ, he doesn't make a dime. And I think that's something that people kind of need to understand. I think when people hear us read the ad read, they're like, okay, well, yeah, I'll go talk to Andy and then I'm gonna have to pay him something. No. If you don't make any money, Andy doesn't make any money. I can't illustrate that enough, and I can't make that, point that out enough. So check him out at myperfectfranchise.net. Links in the description below. And a big, big thank you to Andy for continuing to sponsor us over here at TarHeelIllustrated.com. Again, all the links you need are in the description below. AJ, last thing. I know with Armando, he wants to win. That's Armando Bacot. He talks about it at length, and that's just what he wants to do at North Carolina. We've talked about in the past how he's a guy who understands what it means to put that jersey on and to have North Carolina written across your chest. He understands that. He's the guy, when you think about Armando, who probably goes in the Smith Center and just looks up sometimes because he appreciates and he understands what it means to play for a program that has not only as much expectations around it as Carolina does, but has so much history of winning that North Carolina does as well. So feeding into that, what do you expect from Armando this year? I think the addition of James Okonkwo is an interesting one, because I think it should give him a little bit. You should be able to give Armando a little bit of a break. We've seen Armando just play too much basketball at times over the past few years, especially under Hubert, not getting enough time on the bench. We've seen that lead to injuries in big moments in big games, that maybe if he doesn't have that injury because he plays a little bit less minutes in the previous games or throughout the season, maybe it goes differently for Carolina towards the end of the year. So all of that makes a difference. So with the new roster look, with the addition of a guy like James Okonkwo, in particular, the emergence potentially of Jalen Washington, Zayden High being in the mix now as well, do you think we see, Armando, instead of hitting that 38-minute mark that he was so often hitting, does he maybe now play 33 minutes a game, 34 minutes a game, even lower than that? Do you think, and in turn, do you think that benefits not only North Carolina as a whole, but Armando Bacot as an individual and probably makes him a little bit more efficient? What are your thoughts on how he's going to be used this year?
Yeah, I'll hit on that first, and then I'll hit on the winning thing. I think what it really does, maybe not in the Duke game, he's not going to play 33 minutes, but it's those games where they have the 10-point lead, the 12-point lead. You can rest them an extra minute here and there and maybe play them 26 to 28 minutes in some of those games where they win by 15 or 20, instead of being so paranoid that if you pull him out, like you really don't have an option behind him. It's either Jalen or either one of the Jalens, or maybe even Zayden High, who a lot of people don't think is going to be ready this year. And then you kind of run the risk of another team taking full advantage and maybe going on a push or something. And I think that Hubert coached with that concern a year ago. I wouldn't call it a fear. I would call it a concern. So now what you do is you have a guy that can go in there and be a stopgap. He could plug in, he moves well enough. He's not going to get in the way. He's not a lane killer or anything like that. So I think they should still be able to run their offense move and find shots when Armando's not in the game. So you can rest him for that extra minute or two here and there. And I do think games in which he plays 26, 28, 30 minutes, enough of those will help him later in the year because he's gotten worn down the last 2 years physically. The more you're on the court, especially when you're tired, the higher chance you have an injury. And what's the most likely injury you have when you're tired? It's an ankle injury in basketball.
Yeah.
And that's what he's had the last 2 years. So I think the Okonkwo addition is really good for Hubert, or for Armando. It's really good for Hubert. It's really good for the team. I think the fans now understand when we were saying in May that the only addition they wanted to make was a guy that could back up behind Armando. And people like, well, they need this guy. They need more scores. We kept telling people this is the only thing they're looking for. And that was the only thing they're looking for. And because of what happened with Bob Huggins, James Okonkwo kind of fell into their lap. But that's the guy they were looking for previously, and they found him. So that is that's good fortune for UNC, and it's pretty cool fortune for James Okonkwo to now be on that team, and really good for Armando, because I think Armando will now know he doesn't have to pace himself as much. He can go really hard and check out for a couple minutes, and they're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be okay. I don't think that was always the case, especially when Pete Nance was out. Pete Nance was pretty good at the 5, but 2 years ago, Armando had to pace himself at times because the alternative was Manic at the 5, and he just wasn't a 5. So I think that's big. As far as the winning goes, that's what the guy wants. And the history of the program, I guarantee you Armando knows who Mike O'Koren is.
Oh, I'm sure
he does. I bet he knows who Dennis Weisick is. He knows who Bob Lewis is. He knows who Al Wood is. He knows those guys. He knows who they are. He reads the record books. He understands what that program's all about. He looks up there, and he wants to see him. He wants to see two things up there. He wants to see his jersey on this side, and he wants to see a championship banner over here. And he got close to getting one, believe it or not, with all the warts that team had. And I think that this team has a chance of having a lot fewer warts, and he's still there, and he wants to be a part of it. He wants to win badly. He wants to come back in there one day and take his kid and show up at home up there. Yeah, this is what hard work does, but so is this. This is what hard work does too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he appreciates where he is. He appreciates the platform he's had. And that's one of the reasons he came back.
Mm-hmm.
He came back because he wants to have that jersey. He wants to get both those things hanging up there. He just wants to win. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget after the Wake Forest game last year on the road, which is just another pitiful performance in Winston-Salem by North Carolina. And we couldn't, the players want to come out and talk. We're waiting outside the locker room because they didn't let us in the locker room that time because it was probably not a very fun place.
Yeah, I can
imagine.
A
few times they haven't let us in the locker room on the road. And Armando comes out and says, yeah, I'll take them. I'll take the questions. I'll speak for the team. And he was very straightforward, which he usually is, and just kept saying, I just want to win. If you don't want to win, don't want to play hard, don't come back here. Well, he wants to win. He knows. And everybody listening should know, if you're pulling for Armando to get his jersey in the rafters and all that stuff, that's important to you because he is the all-time leading rebounder in school history. Yeah. It would be kind of awkward if he doesn't get his jersey up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they win, and they win a ton, he's going to have a great year, and he's going to get his jersey up there.
Very cool.
But he wants to win. A byproduct of that is the jersey.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to wrap this one up. I think it's a big season ahead for Armando. I expect him to have a big year. I think the balance on the roster, at least on paper, we got to still, I'm going to keep saying this like a broken record. We still got to see what happens during the year. But the balance I think this roster has is one of the best since Hubert's taken over the job. If not, well, no doubt about it, it is the most balanced roster he's had. So I think that benefits Armando, and I think you should see a more productive Armando as well, especially having some guys that can spare him some minutes as well. So AJ, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. First look ahead series of the year, and we'll be doing plenty of more of these obviously ahead of the new season. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Big thank you to MyPerfectFranchise.net for sponsoring today's show. Links in the description below. Big thank you to Andy. Go get involved and go take control of your own life and career. Open your own franchise. Take that next step that you've been thinking about doing for years now. Just not ready to pull that trigger. Now's the time to do it. There's never going to be a great time. Now's the time to do it. Links in the description below. Again, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. See you on the next one. Thanks.
Thanks.